Welcome to part 5 of this tutorial series where we're creating this Sci-Fi Security Drone in Blender. So in this part, we're going to be mechanically rigging the drone. Now, real quick before we start, tutorials like these are made possible thanks to my Patreon supporters and my Gumroad customers and my members on the YouTube memberships. So if you'd like to help support me and this channel, I will have links in the description to my Gumroad and my Patreon and the YouTube memberships. And I really do appreciate your support because it helps me to continue to create Blender tutorials and content. Alright, so let's get started with this part. Now, while we're rigging, I don't really want to be able to see all these lights because the lights are just kind of getting in the way. So I'm going to move them to a separate collection and then we'll just hide the collection. So I'm going to select the first light and then hold down the shift key and select all of the other lights here. So just those 4 lights. I'm now going to press the M key and then I'm going to click on New Collection and I'm going to rename this collection to Lights and Camera. And then I will click on OK. So we can add the lights and the camera, and we can even add some background elements later in the tutorial series into this collection. So I can click right here to minimize the collection and then I can uncheck it to turn it off. So it's still there, but it's just hidden. So we can just check mark it to turn it back on when we want to use the lighting. So now we just have the drone model that we can rig. Now I'm going to want to animate each side individually. So what I'm going to need to do is apply the mirror modifier, because right now all of these objects are using a mirror modifier and it's mirroring one side over to the other side. But if I want to rotate each of these pieces separately, I'm going to need to apply the mirror modifiers. So I'm going to click right over here to go to the modifier properties of the object. And then I'm just going to apply all of the mirror modifiers. So I'm going to start by just selecting the main object here, the main body. Now the body is just going to be one piece and it's just going to be moving around and move the entire rig. So I don't actually need to apply the mirror modifier on the body. So I'm going to press the H key to hide the body object. And then I'm going to click right here to select the headlight object. And I'm going to click on the mirror. And then with your mouse hovered over the mirror modifier, you can press Ctrl A and that will apply it. So I can press the H key to hide that. Then I want to select this object here, and this object, the eye object, doesn't actually have a mirror modifier, so I can press H to hide that. Let's click on this object right here, and you can click on the mirror, and then with your mouse hovered over the mirror modifier and with it selected, you can press Ctrl A, or you can also click right here on the drop down and click on Apply. And then I can press H to hide that. I'm going to click on this one, click on the mirror, press Ctrl A, and then H to hide that. This one here, click right here and then press Ctrl A, and then I can press H to hide that object. Click right here, select the mirror, and I'm going to press Ctrl A and then H to hide that. Let's select this object here, click on the mirror and press Ctrl A, and then the H key to hide it. This one here, click on the mirror and apply that. H to hide it, and then this object here, select the mirror and press Ctrl A and then H to hide it. Now this object here, this is a curve object. So if I click on the mirror and press Ctrl A to apply it, we're going to get an error. So what I want to do is convert this from a curve object to a mesh object. So to do this, I can click on Object and then I can go right down here to Convert, and I want to click on Mesh. So now if I press the tab key to go into edit mode, you can see its actual geometry. And because we converted it to a mesh, it also applied the mirror modifier. So I can now press Alt H just to unhide everything. And now the mirror modifiers have been applied on all these objects, but the objects are still connected. They are still the same object. So I want to separate both sides so that they are separate objects. Now, just like I did before, I'm going to hide the objects which don't have a mirror, or I don't need to apply the mirror. So if I click on the body, I don't need to apply the mirror. So I'm going to press H to hide this. And then this object right here, the eye object, that doesn't have a mirror and we don't need to separate it to different sides. So I'm going to press H to hide that. So all of these other objects, I want this side to be separate objects from this side. So press the A key to select all of those objects. And I'm going to press the tab key to go into edit mode. And then you can press the 1 on the top of your keyboard to go to the vertex select. I'm going to press the A key to deselect everything, and then I'm going to hold down the Z button and go into wireframe. I'm now going to press B for the box select, and I'm going to click and drag and box select all of the vertices on this side. And then I want all of the parts of these objects which are selected to be their own object. So I'm going to press P, and then I can click on selection. And these were separate objects, but because we did this all at once, I can now tab to go back to object mode, go back into solid view, and you can see now these are all separate objects. So that's a separate object, and this is a separate object, and all these pieces are separate objects, and they're separate from these objects over here. So that is exactly what I want. Let's press Ctrl S to save. and then I can press Alt-H to unhide those other objects. Now if I zoom in over here to this side and take a look at the hinges, I want this hinge here, and also this hinge here, and also the piping to all be one object, because they're going to rotate together. So what I'm going to do is select the piping, then hold down the Shift key and select this object, and then hold down the Shift key and select this object last. I'm now going to press Ctrl J, and that is going to join them all together, and the modifiers from the last object that was selected will be added to the other objects, because these objects will be added into that object. So now these are all one object. So I want to do that for the other side as well. So I'm going to navigate over here. I'm going to select this piece, hold down the Shift key, select this piece, and also this piece here. I'm going to select that piece last, and then I can press Ctrl J. And if I tap into edit mode, you can see now they're all one object. And then also these two headlight objects, we're not really going to rig them. They are attached to the body, and so I'm not going to move them around at all. So I can just select this piece, hold down the Shift key, select this piece. So we have both of the headlights selected, and I can just press Ctrl J just to join them together again. And the same thing goes for these top hinge objects here. So I'm going to select this piece right here, hold down the Shift key, select this one right here, and I can press Ctrl J just to join them together, so they're now one object. But all these other objects here, these are going to rotate separately, so I do want them to be separate objects. Now this is totally optional, you don't have to do this if you don't want to, but I'm going to rename all the objects. So I'm going to click and drag to make the outline bigger, and I'm going to click on the arrow here to open up the collection. So real quick, I'm just going to go through and rename these just because I want to keep my scene very organized. So I'm just going to rename this to body. Then I can press H to hide that. Click on this object here, headlights, all right, H to hide that. And this is going to be eye object, and then also click right here. This is going to be the gun hinge, hide that. Let's also click right here. So this one, I'm going to rename this to right gun, H to hide that. This one here, this is going to be left gun. And then this one right over here is going to be left hinge. All right, hide that one. This one here is going to be left pipe. I can press H to hide that. And then this is going to be left blade frame, and I can hide that. And then this object here is going to be left blades. All right, hide that there. And then over on this side, I'm going to rename it to the same, but it's going to be right instead of left. So this object right here, this is going to be right hinge. All right, and then hide that. This object here is going to be right pipe. Hide that. This one here is going to be right blade frame. And then the last object here, and this is going to be right blades. All right, so I've just gone through here and renamed these. So if you want to, you can just pause the video and you can rename them. I'm just going to press Alt-H now to unhide that. All right, so all the objects have been named now. Now I also want to make sure that this position is the default scale and rotation of the objects, because if I rotate the objects and I want to clear the rotation and bring them back, I'd want this to be the default rotation and the default scale. So I'm going to press the A key to select all the objects, and then I'm going to press Ctrl A, and I'm going to apply the rotation and scale. Now I'm applying the rotation and scale, but I'm not applying the location. Why I'm not applying the location is because I'm going to have the objects rotate from their origin. But if I apply the location of an object, it's always going to bring the origin into the very center, and that's not what I want, because on default, objects rotate from the object's origin. So to keep the objects in the default location that they are, I'm going to lock the location values. All right, so now we can start with the mechanical rigging. So I'm just going to make this smaller and bring this up here. So I'm going to start by rigging the blasters on the bottom of the robot. Now in the earlier part, we already set the origin point to the center there. So if I double tap the R key, you can see it's going to rotate correctly in the ball and socket joint. Now for some reason that got messed up, you can tab into edit mode on this object. You can hover your mouse over the sphere there and press the L key. That's going to select the linked vertices. And then you can press Shift S and you can go to cursor to selected. This way the 3D cursor is going to be in the center of where the ball and socket joint is going to rotate. And then I can press tab to go back to object mode. So I'm now going to click right here on object, and I'm going to click on set origin, and I'm going to click on origin to 3D cursor. So when I double tap the R key, you can see now it's rotating correctly. Now we already applied the object scale, so if I press Alt S, that's not going to move it around. And I also cleared the rotation, so if I press Alt R, that's not going to affect it. However, However, if I press Alt-G to clear the location, it moves into the center. And this is because the origin point is right there, it's not in the very center. So to fix this problem, I can lock the location values. So with this object selected, you can press the N key, and that's going to open up the side panel. And you can see the location values have a bunch of values, but the rotation is 0 and the scale is 1. So what I can do is just click and drag down on these locks here, the little lock icons, and that's going to lock it. So now if I press G to grab, or R to rotate, or S to scale, I can't actually move it. Now I do want to be able to rotate it, but I don't want to be able to scale it or move it. So right here on the rotation, I'm going to click right here to uncheck the rotation. So now if I press Alt-G to clear the location, you can see it's not moving, it's staying where it is. But I can double tap the R key and I can rotate this around, and then when I want to bring it back to its default pose, I can press Alt-R, and that's going to clear the rotation. Now if I click right over here on the other gun, I want to do the same thing. So first I need to center the origin into the center of the ball and socket joint. So to do this, you press the Tab key to go into edit mode, make sure everything is deselected, and then with your mouse hovered over this object, you can press the L key. That's going to select the entire piece. Then I'm going to press Shift S. I'm going to move my mouse down to cursor to selected, so the cursor is in the center there. And then Tab to go back to object mode, and I can click on object, and I'm going to click on set origin to 3D cursor. And then I want to click right here to lock all the location, and also click here to lock the scale. And I can double tap the R key, rotate the gun around, kind of point the gun over, but then I can press Alt-R and it's going to clear the rotation so it's back to its default pose. So with this object selected, I can press H to hide it because we're finished with it. Select this object, press H to hide it. And then if I click on this object right here, I don't want to be able to move this object around at all because this object is going to be connected to the body. So if I click on this object here, I'm going to click and drag down and lock all the values, and then I can press H to hide it. And then I'm going to do the same thing for the headlights because the headlights are just going to move along with the body. So select the headlights, and I can click and drag down, lock all those, and then I can press H to hide it. Now this body object is in the center of the 3D scene already. And so all of the location, rotation, and scale should be at the defaults. But just to make sure, you can press Ctrl A and you can click on all transforms to apply that. And I don't want to lock any of these values because I'm going to use the body object to control all of the other objects. So I can press the H key to hide that, and then I can click on the eye, and just like the headlights object, the eye object is going to move along with the body. So what I'm going to do is press Ctrl A, and I'm going to click on all transforms just to apply that, and then I'm going to click and drag down to lock all the values, and then I can press H to hide that. All right, so now we just need to finish up these two side pieces. So I'm first going to click on this piece right here, and this piece, I want it to rotate like this on the X-axis. So what I'm going to do is tab into edit mode, and I'm going to hold down the Alt key and select that loop of vertices right there. And that is the place where I want it to rotate from. So I'm going to press Shift S, move my mouse down to cursor to selected and let go, and then I can tab to go back to object mode. And then I can click on object, I can click on set origin, and I'm going to do origin to 3D cursor. So now the origin point is right there, so if I rotate it, that's where it's going to rotate from. Now if I press R to rotate and then hit X, I only want this piece to rotate on the X-axis. So let's click and drag down to lock all these values, and then I just want to rotate it on the X-axis, so I'm going to unlock the rotation X right there. So now if I press R to rotate, you can see that I can only rotate this on the X-axis. So I now want to do the same thing for the other side. So I'm first just going to press H to hide this. Let's go right over here, select this object, tab into edit mode, hold down the Alt key, just select that loop right there. I can press Shift S, we're going to go to cursor to selected, let go, and then I can tab to go back to object mode. I can click on object, we're going to set the origin to the 3D cursor, and then I can lock all these values by clicking and dragging down, but then I only want it to rotate on the X-axis, so I can click right there to turn that off to unlock that, and now I can only rotate this on the X. So I can press H to hide that. Let's go back over here and we'll do the next object. So this object, I only want it to rotate on the Y-axis, and I want to rotate it from the center here. So I'm going to tab into edit mode, press A to deselect everything, and with my mouse hovered over this object here, I can press the L key, that'll select the linked vertices, and this is where I want it to rotate from. So I'm going to press Shift S, go to cursor to selected, just like that. We'll tab to go back to object mode, and I can click on object, and we're going to set the origin to the 3D cursor. And then I only want to rotate this on the y-axis. You can kind of test it by hitting R and then Y. So what I'm going to do is click and drag down here, lock all the values, and then click right here to unlock the Y. And there we go, that is rotating correctly. So I'll press H to hide that. Let's do the same thing over here. So select this object, we'll go into edit mode, A to deselect everything, press the L key with your mouse hovered over that object, and I'm going to press Shift S. We're going to go down to cursor to selected, and then we're going to go back to object mode, and then we can go object, and we're going to set the origin to the 3D cursor. And then again, I can lock all of these values by dragging down, but then we just want to unlock the Y rotation. And just test this out by pressing the R key to rotate that, and that is working great. So I can press H to hide it. All right, let's do the next object. We only have a few more left. So this object is going to rotate again on the y-axis, just like the other object, and it's going to rotate from this area. So I'm going to tab to go into edit mode, and I'm going to click right here to go to the face select, and then I can select this face. Let's go over here, and then hold down the shift key and select this face. So this is where I want the center of the rotation to be. So again, press Shift S, cursor to selected. We're going to go into object mode, object, set origin, and origin to 3D cursor. And then just to test this, R and Y, that's where we want it to rotate. So I'm just going to lock all the values except the rotation Y. And hopefully you're noticing a trend here. I'm kind of doing the same thing over and over again. So once you get the concept down, it should be really easy. I'm just centering the origin to where I want it to rotate, and then I'm locking the values, and that's pretty much it. And then of course we will need to parent the objects, and that's really easy to do. We'll do it after this. So I'm going to press H to hide that object. We'll do the same thing. So go into edit mode, select this. We're going to go right over here, shift select this. I'm going to press Shift S, cursor to selected, and then I can go back to object mode. I'm going to click on object, and we're going to set the origin to the 3D cursor, and then I can click down to lock all the values, but we're not going to lock the Y rotation. And there we go, that's rotating correctly. So I'll press H to hide that, and then we need to do this one here. So these objects, I just want it to rotate from the center of the geometry. So I'm actually going to select both of these objects at the same time. We can do these both at once, and I can click on object, set origin, and then I can set the origin to geometry because we want to center the origin to the very center of the actual mesh. So origin to geometry. So now you can see that is in the center there, and that is in the center there. Now these ones I only want to rotate on the z-axis. So again, we're going to lock all the values, and then we're going to unlock the Z rotation, and that way it only rotates on the Z axis. And then right here, click on this, I can drag down, lock all the values, but not the rotation Z. All right, and there we go. So now everything is rotating correctly. So I can press Alt H to unhide all the objects. So press Ctrl S again to save. I can press the N key to close the side panel. And now we can parent all the objects. Because if I rotate this object, you can see it's not moving the other object. Also, if I rotate this, it's not rotating the fan. And like the body isn't moving the rest of the objects. So we need to parent all the objects to the other objects. So when you parent one object to another object, the parent object is going to move the child object. And the best way to do this is to start from the object which is farthest out and then parent back and back all the way to the very center of the object. So I'm first going to select this object here, and then I'm going to hold down the shift key and select this object last, because this object here is going to be the child object, and then this object is going to be the parent. So the child will still be able to move by itself, so it'll still be able to rotate, but when the parent object rotates, the child object will always move along with it. So select this object, hold down the shift key, select this object, and I can press Ctrl P, and I'm going to set parent to object, keep transform. So again, this is the child object, so it can move separately without the other object moving, but if I select the parent object and rotate it, you can see the child object is rotating around with it. So I can press Alt R to clear the rotation. So I want to do the same thing here, because if I rotate this object, it needs to rotate this circular piece here. So select this object, hold down the shift key, select the pipe object, and I can press Ctrl P, and we want to set parent to object, keep transform. And why I'm choosing keep transform is to just make sure that the objects don't move around. So I can now click on this object, and I can rotate this, and then I can click on this object and rotate this, and then I can click on the rotor blades and rotate them. So you can see this is a child of this object, but then this is a child of this object. So I can select everything and press Alt-R to clear the rotation. So I want to do the same thing here. So just select this object, hold down the Shift key, select that object, and I can press Control-P, and I'm going to do Object Keep Transform. So now I can rotate this object. It's going to move all the others. So I'll press Alt-R to clear the rotation. And then I want the body to move the entire thing. So I'm going to select this object and then Shift select the body. And I can press Control-P, and I'm going to set parent to Object Keep Transform. All right, so I can move this around, and that's working great. Now, the headlights, the eye, and the hinges are all going to move with the body. So I'm going to select the eye, and also hold down the Shift key, and select the headlights, and also hold down the Shift key and select these bottom hinges. And then we want all of these objects to be parented to the body. So hold down the Shift key and select the body last. And I know the body is selected last because it's a yellow outline where these other objects are an orange outline. So I can now press Control-P and Object Keep Transform. So now I can move this around. It's going to move all of that around. So that is great. So let's now do the blasters. So I'm going to select this blaster here, hold down the Shift key, select that one there. And then lastly, I want to select the hinge right there. I can now press Control-P, set parent to Object Keep Transform. So now if I move this around, that's all going to move with it. But then I can move the gun separately by double tapping the R key. Press the A key to select everything, and I'll press Alt-R and Alt-G to bring that back to its default position. So now we just need to do the same thing for this side. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'm going to select the blades and then Shift select the frame, Control-P, Keep Transform. And then again, we're going to select the frame, Shift select the pipes, Control-P. We want to set parent to Object Keep Transform. Then select the pipes and Shift select the hinges last, Control-P. And I want to do the Keep Transform, and then I can select the hinge and Shift select the body and a Control-P, set parent to Object Keep Transform. All right, so there we go. So now it is really important just to test everything to make sure it's working properly. So I can rotate this, move it around. I can even scale it and move it up here. I can also double tap the R key. That's good. Double tap the R key and that gun is moving. And then also here, if I try to rotate this, I can't move it. If I try to rotate this object, I can't move it, and this one as well, so those are stuck there. And then I'm just going to test these to make sure they're working properly. So I can select this object, that's working great. And then also this here, that's working good. And this there, that's working good. And this here. So I can move that around, kind of rotate this, just make sure everything is working properly. And also if I rotate this, I can see that there is a gap here. So this isn't overlapping the other object. And then over here, just test this. So we can rotate that. We can rotate this as well. That's looking good. And rotate that. And also this piece here, rotate that. All right, so everything appears to be working properly. So I can press the A key to select everything, and I'll press Alt-R and Alt-G, and that's going to clear the rotation and location. So now I can press Alt-R, Alt-G, and Alt-S to clear the transforms. And let's press Control-S again to save. All right, and that is pretty much it for the rigging. Now there is another optional thing that you could add just to make the animating a little bit easier. I am going to be creating some little handle objects that I can grab, and it'll make the animating a little bit easier. Now it's totally optional. You don't have to do it if you don't want to. You can just select the objects, but in these object edit modes, I'm going to add some little wireframe objects, and you won't be able to see them in the rendered view because they won't have any faces. So I'm first going to select the body and tab into edit mode. And I'm going to click right here to go to the vertex select. I'm going to hold down the Alt key and just select that loop of vertices right there. I'm now going to press Shift D to duplicate. Then I can press S to scale, and I'm going to scale this up. And actually, we could turn back on the reference images just so that we can preview where they are. So I'm going to go right up here to the outliner and click on this to preview the reference images again. Or you can just eyeball it and place it where you want. And then I'm going to press 1 on the numpad to go to front view, and I'm going to scale this down a bit. and I can press G to grab, and I'm going to bring this over on the x-axis and push it into the mirror. And because we have the clipping turned on the mirror modifier, it's going to merge that together. All right, so if I press the tab key to go back to object mode, you can see that these little handles here are within the same object because we added them in edit mode. But because the wireframe here doesn't have any visible faces, we can't actually see it in the rendered view. So I'm just going to do that for some of the other objects. So I find it very easy just to hide the objects once we're done working with it, and that way it's out of the way. So I'm going to select this object, press H to hide it, click on this here, the headlights, H to hide it, and this here, the eye, H to hide it, and also this part here, H to hide it. And then also the blasters here are easy enough just to select them and rotate them. So I can press H and H to hide them. All right, and then these other objects, we can actually do it at the same time. So I'm going to select this object here, hold down the shift key, and select this object here. And then I can tab to go into edit mode, and we are now in the multi-object editing, so we can edit them both at once. Now I already had these parts selected before, but if they're not selected, just hold down the Alt key, select that loop right there, and then navigate over here, and I want to hold down the Shift and Alt key and select that right there. So now both of those loops are selected. Now I want to duplicate these and scale them up, but I want to scale them up from their own origins, not the center. So I'm going to click right up here to change the transform pivot point, and I'm going to change this to individual origins. So I can now press Shift D to duplicate, then I'll hit S to scale, and I'm just going to scale these up and place it there. Let's also press 1 on the numpad to go to front view. I could maybe scale these up a bit more and maybe place that there. I'm just kind of looking at the reference and seeing where I added those rigging handles. So something like that. All right, tab to go back to object mode. So this makes it a little bit easier just to select this big handle here and rotate it instead of having to go in here and select that little piece in there. So I can press H to hide this and H to hide this. So let's now do the other objects. So I'm going to select this object here, hold down the shift key, select this object here, and then I'm going to tab to go into edit mode. Now the center rotation of these two objects are these pieces here, which we already have selected. And again, if they're not selected, just press the L key with your mouse hovered over the pieces and select both of them. And then we still have the individual origins turned on. So I'm going to press Shift D to duplicate, and then I'm going to hit S to scale. I'm going to scale this up a bit, and I'm going to press 1 on the numpad and scale these up to fit the reference, so just about there. Then I can press 7 on the numpad for top view, and I want to squish them down. So I'm going to press S to scale. Let's scale this on the y-axis, and I can type in 0 and then enter. And this way they're going to be squashed down and they're on top of each other. Now I need to merge the vertices because right now they're overlapping. So I can press the M key, and then I'm just going to merge by distance. So this way any vertices which are overlapping and are really close to each other, they're going to be merged together. And you can see right down here it says removed 64 vertices. So now I'm just going to press X to delete, and we just want to delete the faces, so click on only faces. You don't want to click on faces because that'll get rid of the vertices which are making the face, so click on only faces, and there we go, it's deleted. I can tab to go back to object mode, and now we have these nice little handles here which I can rotate. So I can press H to hide that, and click on this and press H to hide that. So we're going to do a very similar thing for these rotor frames. So select that piece, hold down the shift key, select that piece, and I can tab to go into edit mode. And then we already have those parts selected, but if they're not selected, you can hold down the Alt key, select that loop right there. We're going to navigate over here and hold down the Shift and Alt key and select that loop right there, so they're both selected. And then over here, hold down the Shift and Alt key and select that loop, and then navigate over here and hold down the Shift and Alt key and select that loop. So I'm now going to press Shift D to duplicate, and then I'm going to hit S to scale, and I'm going to scale them up. Now I want to squish them together in the center, so I'm going to click right here to change the transform pivot point, and I'm going to change this back to median point. So I can now press S to scale. We're going to scale it on the y-axis, and I can type in 0 and then enter. And then I'm just going to press the M key to merge, and I want to click on by distance so they're merged together. So I can now just scale these up, but I want to scale them up by their individual origins, not the center. So I can go right here on the transform pivot point. I can change this to individual origins, and then I can press S to scale, just kind of scale those up. And then if I press 1 for front view, I can scale that to match the reference. And then we still have faces in there, so I can press X to delete, and I can click on only faces because I just want to delete the faces but not the vertices. Alright, tab back into object mode, and we now have some nice little handles there to rotate that. And then these objects here are easy enough just to select and rotate. So I'll press Alt H to unhide everything. And let's press Ctrl S to save the Blender file. So now you can just test out your controllers. So I really like these handles because they're larger and they're really easy just to select and then rotate. So it really does help to make the animation easier. And then again, to clear the values, you can just select all the objects and press Alt R and Alt G and Alt S. Alright, so I'm going to press Ctrl S to save, and the rigging is finished. And this is going to wrap it up for this part of the tutorial series. So I hope you've been learning a lot, and I hope you've been enjoying it, and thank you for watching. So in the next part, we're going to be creating a basic city environment, and then we're going to be posing the drone and rendering out a final render. And then in the last part, in part 7, we're going to be doing the animation and video editing that together with the sound effects. So to watch part 6, I will have it right up there on the end screen, and also the link in the description when it is released. And again, if you'd like to help support me and this channel, I will have links in the description to my Gumroad and my Patreon and the YouTube memberships. And I really do appreciate all of my supporters. It really does make these tutorials possible. So again, thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next part.